Shabbat Shalom. When I first got to town in Atlanta, there was a Moel. There was someone who would officiate at a bris, at a circumcision, and do what I would call the hard part. And one of the parents was very anxious, and they were reflecting that anxiety in a very visible way. And the Moel said, don't worry, just do what I do. Close your eyes. Glad that worked. All right. I want to offer a few thoughts today about looking and not looking. So there's a famous story that we read today about the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And as the cities are being destroyed, Lot and his family are rescued, are redeemed, are taken out by two visitors, two angels. And they are warned God is going to rain down fire and brimstone upon these cities. You are going to escape. And God says, Al tabit acharecha, do not look back. And in fact, we see later on that they are leaving, and Lot's wife turns around. V'tabet ishto me'acharav v'tehi nitziv melech. She turns around, and she turns into a pillar of salt. And this is not like when my kids was driving and turned around and turned into a parked car. This is literally, she is punished, she is frozen in place as a pillar of salt because she turned around. So before I offer my own thoughts and reflections, I want to pose to this very thoughtful group a question, which is, why is it so important that Mrs. Lot not turn around as they are leaving the cities that are being destroyed? Why must they keep eyes forward? Why does God make this command? And why does she, in fact, turn into a pillar of salt? So I'll open it up to y'all. Why might this be? Why can't they look? Yes, Josh.
Because if you're not committed to going forward, you'll eventually tie yourself backwards.
Because if you're not looking forward, right, you are tied backwards. So they are, in some ways, if you look back, you're not only, like you say, you can't, it's not just that you have to take the person out of Sodom, you have to take Sodom out of the person, right? And so if they remain attached to the values of where they left, then they are not worthy of salvation. One great view, one thought. Anyone else want to weigh in? There's other good answers out there, and even some bad answers possibly, but we'll take them all. Josh is the only one? Yeah, go ahead.
There's something negative about spectatorship of destruction and misery.
Spectatorship of destruction. So the Germans have a word that only the Germans could make up. It's Schadenfreude, which means sort of taking pleasure in the misfortune of others. And that is definitely a phenomenon in our society, right? They say in the press, if it bleeds, it leads. No one wants to buy a newspaper where the front page is people sitting on a park bench looking happy, right? That we have this human urge to see suffering, destruction, pain, right? The entire genre of horror movies, right? There are 10 Saw movies. And the reason why people go see them is not because of the scripting, it's because they want to see whether someone's going to have something horrible to happen to them and blood's going to splurt everywhere. I'm sorry I've ruined all the Saw movies for you now. Other ideas? Yes, Rabbi.
I would suggest it's a little bit of a missed opportunity because, and we know this is what's going on right now, if you don't look backwards even just a little bit, if you don't understand history, you're doomed to repeat it.
So Rabbi Kaiser Blueth suggests that maybe we should look back because you have to know where you're coming from. I would suggest you stay on a low-salt diet, my friend. So our ancient commentators, our medieval commentators, raise many of the thoughtful suggestions you've made here. And so Ramban says that if you look back at what is happening, even looking at suffering of others, that it is contagious, that somehow your soul is contaminated by what it is that you see. Sforno says, like Josh, that if you are looking back, then you are not able to make progress. You are not able to look forward. And Rashi says, it's not fitting that you should witness their doom while you yourself are escaping, right? Who are you to like gloat, I got away, you're, right? That there's actually something about recognizing that some kinds of suffering should not be witnessed, that there's a dignity that people have to have even if they are having something terrible happening to them. So I would like to suggest to you that this lesson of Lot and his wife are things that we need to think about in this moment. And I thank Yoni for anticipating a little bit. So we live in a world where we are constantly in a tension between what we look at and what we don't look at. So there is a temptation to just sort of look at what is going on in the world, to continue to just look through social media, right? So Lot's wife might have been the inventor of doom scrolling, right? But for us, right, that you can get sucked into doing nothing but watching news story after news story, picture after picture, right? Reading comment after comment as your blood continues to seethe and boil and just get sucked in to this imagery which prevents you, like Mrs. Lot, from moving forward. And so on one level, right, we can say, well, gee, like Mrs. Lot, if you are looking back, then you can't be moving forward. If you spend all of your time looking at the bad, you have no energy left to actually move forward and to do what is good. So that's one view, and I'm going to come back to that. But the view that we heard of looking at doom, that in fact it is harmful to your soul, right, there is nothing worse for your mental well-being than reading the comments. And the question is, are there things that we should not see? And knowing that some of us on this room are journalists or members of other more reputable professions, there is the question of what is it do you choose to report? What do you show? Of the information you have available, how graphic is the picture you turn to show? How detailed do you make your descriptions of what it is that has transpired? What do you show in full and what gets blurred out? So I had someone reach out to me this week. So one of the things that happened in Israel on October 7th was that the folks who've poured out of Gaza to commit rape and murder and torture were actually wearing body cams because they wanted the folks back home to know what they had done. And so that footage is available, and it was showed to journalists. In general, you won't see it on the media. I have people sending it to me saying, you've got to put this on the Shul website. So first of all, no one looks at our Shul website, with all due respect. But these are things that, if I think about the dignity of the people who are pictured and all the terrible things are being done to them, having those things shown to other people is a diminishment of their dignity in some way. And in my life, part of my job is that I sometimes see terrible things. I sometimes talk to terrible people. So sometimes I am in a hospital and someone has been through an accident. Sometimes I am sitting with someone who has tried or even succeeded in killing someone, right? Those are not experiences that many of us are fortunate to not have had those experiences in our lives. And you become a different person by having experienced those things, and I wish for most of us that we not do so. And so, in fact, these videos that were sent to me, I watched some of them. I had to download a chat app that I normally don't use because you can't see these things. They won't put these things on media that, you have to get some weird Russian social media app to see this stuff. And what I would reflect to you is, like, I actually feel a little worse for having seen them, but I felt like I needed to know, right? That it wasn't just, I saw a news report, somebody said, I know. And so that's the spirit. The flip side is, before Sodom and Gomorrah even destroyed, you have God saying, Erda na ver'eh, hakatzakata habalai asu kala, v'imlo eda'a. I need to go, and I need to see whether what people are saying about Sodom and Gomorrah is true. And by the way, God is everywhere. God knows everything. But even so, God says, I got to go check this out. I can't just work with what I'm hearing. And in fact, we are told that those cities were destroyed, were unique in their evil. Now, some folks will tell you that these cities were destroyed because of their practices in the bedroom. And I will tell you that that is not true. That was what everyone did back then. And even that this is actually, in fact, about how they treated people who are not like them. That the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was about the way they treated foreigners and others in their midst. And I will tell you that the Bronze Age was not a golden age for human rights, but that Sodom and Gomorrah even stood out, right? In a world where conquest and war was just what you did, they went above and beyond in a way that said, this is something, right? The Moabites conquer and kill, the Ammonites conquer and kill, the Philistines do their part. You guys are just beyond, but I have to know and see that to understand why you guys have to be destroyed and why this is different. And so we live in a time and a place where choices are made for us about what we see, and then we further are our own editors. We decide what we choose to look at. And there are images of destruction that are put in front of us, and there is no image of destruction that is good, right? A picture of someone crying because their house was destroyed, because their cousin was killed, that's not good no matter who it happened to. But I think, unfortunately, in order to really understand what is going on, and this is where Yoni started taking us, that you have to be able to see not just little piece, you have to understand a picture. So even though Lot's wife was turned into salt for looking back, and perhaps with a sense of voyeurism, like, oh, I got to see this, look how happened to my neighbor, Abraham does the same thing. Abraham is standing early in the morning. He looks towards Sodom and Gomorrah, the land of the plain, and the smoke of the country went up like the smoke of a furnace. So he sees from afar the pillar of smoke coming up where these cities are being destroyed, and he knows that destruction is taking place. But in the ancient world, smoke and clouds of fire are the modern version of pixelation of an image. So he knows that there's destruction. He does not need to see all of the details. So Abraham originally had argued with God. He had said, look, don't destroy the city. What if there are 50 righteous people? What if there are 40? What if there are 30? What if there are 20? Makes his way down to 10, and God's like, look, I'm sorry, I can't do this with you. Abraham has pled for the people of these cities because it is in the nature of any ethical human being to see suffering and to say, ugh, I wish that wouldn't happen. It is the nature of anyone to see harm come to human beings and be distraught. And Abraham has to see the whole picture and understand that there is destruction and there is destruction. So the reason why Sodom and Gomorrah are being wrecked as they are is because of what happened before, and because there were not righteous people to be found, or at least those righteous people were not in charge. And so when we look at images, we have to remember that we are seeing smoke and fog, but that I would not encourage anyone here to look at the images that provoked what you are seeing now. Your soul will be better for it. But to know that they have been seen is important. And to know that the folks who did it, who are living in Qatar, Qatar, if you know how to pronounce it correctly, with their billions, have said, and by the way, if we have the chance, we're going to order our people to do that again. And so this is not revenge. This is still self-defense. That the reason why Israeli tanks are in Gaza right now is because the people who murdered 1,400 people have said, we plan to do it again if you give us the chance to rebuild our tunnels. If you send us pipes, we will use them to build rockets, not to build our sewer systems. If you send us concrete, we are going to use it to build tunnels, not to rebuild the homes of the people whose homes we used to shelter our tunnels and our headquarters. And so I hope that this war is over as quickly as possible, because the people of Gaza deserve a leadership who will care for them at all. And the people of Israel deserve to have peace and to know that their neighbors are not plotting to kill them on the other side of a wall that they would rather not have be there if they could help it. We are all faced with the question of what we look and see and don't see. So we can be like Lot's wife, and we can get caught up in looking at things that make us worse for it. Or we can even perhaps take pleasure in seeing destruction. And you know what? You shouldn't gloat, because the suffering of no human being should be celebrated. Like Abraham, you have to look out and you have to see the landscape, though you have to understand what's happening. And Josh set us up well to say that ultimately the reason why you don't look back is you have to look forward. So the world is still in a state of conflict. If you look at our college campuses, at streets around the world, at the halls of legislature and government, there is a war being fought of hatred, a war being fought of information, of disinformation, of misinformation. In about a week and a half, there will be a rally in Washington, and I think as many people as possible should go so that the truth is told. But I will tell you right now that I will not be there because I am teaching a bris class. There is training that is going on for people to perform Brit Milah, to be moles, and I am teaching don't worry, I'm teaching the non-knife parts of the class. But it took me about 10 seconds to realize that although this is important, that I can't let those who want to cause hate and destruction stop us from thinking about what future generations need, and can't stop us from thinking about who it is that we want to be and a covenant that we want to continue. And so, as we read the stories in this week's scroll, and as we are tempted perhaps to doom scroll, I would remind us to look back only a little bit, but to make sure that we look forward as well. Shabbat Shalom.